and the proposal to have a convention of states. And as you know, Senator, this is a controversial idea amongst your fellow conservatives. So talk to me about what your thoughts are on a convention of states.
Okay, I'm going to challenge that first thing sort of out of the box.
Okay.
It's really not that controversial. It is controversial. There are a small group of people who are very, very loud who oppose this. But if you look at every major conservative think tank, organization, conservative thought leaders, constitutional scholars, I mean, you look at across the board of like the Heritage Foundation, for example, and you take every thought leader in the Republican Party, almost every presidential candidate. I mean, everyone believes this is the right approach because everyone sees the fundamental problem of Washington out of control, whether it's now $34 trillion in spending, whether it's the abuse of our laws, whether it's the abuse of the bureaucracy, whether it's seizing power away from the people in the state and centralizing it in Washington, and particularly now increasingly the president. Everyone admits the problem, and the vast majority of Republicans, those who have actually thought about it, studied it, are all in favor of it. But there is a small minority, a very vocal one, and I know you hear from them at WHO, that are, I would argue, outside of the mainstream of the conservative movement. This is like the John Birch Society, who was thrown out of the conservative movement by Ronald Reagan and Barry Goldwater, 60 years ago. They're sort of back out of the basement and trying to stir up problems. But this is in the Constitution. I just remind everybody that Article 5 of the Constitution provides for this. Our founders provided for this. Our founders knew that as ever Republican history happened, that tyranny eventually rises up and centralization of power happens, and we need a mechanism to wrest that power away from the tyrants, and they put this provision in for this purpose. So I would just say this. Do you believe in the Constitution? Do you trust the founders' wisdom? And do you think we're at a time where we need to seize power out of Washington? If you can check the box on all three of those things, then my sense is it's time.
Well, and Senator, I noticed that you were first starting to talk about the out-of-control spending. And so my question to you is, what would you hope would come out of Convention of the States? Would it be something like a balanced budget amendment?
I think a balanced budget amendment will be debated. I think it'll be proposed. Do I think that 38 states will ratify a balanced budget amendment? I don't think so. I'd like to believe that, but I'm not sure that we're at a point in America that a bunch of these blue and purple state legislatures are going to want to stop the gravy train coming from Washington, D.C., because all this deficit spending, a lot of it ends up in state capitals with Medicaid and transportation funds and a whole host of other funds that come to the states. And so I'd like to think that we could do it, but here's the key. We're going to have a national debate about this. This will be the biggest event in the history of the country from the standpoint of our Constitution. We're going to have all the American public focused in on what should be the role of the states, what should be the role of the federal government, what should be the role of allowing more freedoms to our people, and have a debate about limitations on spending and taxation and balancing budget. Have a debate about term limits, not just for members of Congress, but for bureaucrats, which I think is one of the most important features of our of this process. Is we can talk about how to get to the deep state, and then finally, what we can do about limiting the power of Washington. Have a debate about what belongs in what at the county level versus the state level versus the federal level. Now, I mean, everything is being centralized. Every decision is being made in Washington. States, and your great governor, Kim Reynolds, is fighting that, but they're fighting a battle that's with one hand tied behind their back because they have no power in the Constitution to do it. You have the 10th Amendment, but there's no way that the courts have not enforced the 10th Amendment because in the 10th Amendment, there's no enforcement mechanism. That's the problem. So that's something you could address at the Convention of States. You could actually give teeth to the 10th Amendment. There's all sorts of things that will be debated, and I don't understand how anybody who's a conservative should be afraid of that debate, should be afraid of having this discussion. Remember, this convention only proposes amendments. It does nothing else. Everything that's proposed has to get 38 state legislatures to ratify it. The idea that something crazy is going to happen is ridiculous. It's hard to get to people to agree at what time the sun rises across our country, much less try to get them to agree on, quote, radical changes one way or the other.
So to the basics of the discussion, Senator Santorum, I said earlier this is a legislative issue. What has to happen in this Iowa legislature? What do you want?
We'd like a resolution passed that says that these three subject matters, we will have a convention. 19 other states have already passed this. Every other, hardcore conservative state, certainly in the South and in the Midwest, has passed this. And from Texas to Florida to Georgia, I mean, you look at all the states that you would look to as saying, what are they doing to help our country? Those states have already acted, and now Iowa has become a more red state, a more conservative state. They need to join with these other states to pass a resolution that says that will be a convention called with all 50 states participating, one state, one vote, and each of those, and there will be three things on the agenda. One, limit terms of federal office holders. That includes bureaucrats. Number two, limit fiscal limitations on the federal government. And three, limitations of the jurisdiction of the federal government. And that's the debate that will happen. And as I said before, it'll be, I imagine every kid in America having to learn the Constitution and learn about checks and balances and state and federalism and all these things that they don't learn today. Now we're going to have an opportunity to educate a generation of young people about what the Constitution was meant to be and could be again.
He's passionate about it. You can tell he is an Iowa caucus winner. He is a senator. Rick Santorum. Senator Santorum, it was great talking with you on this topic and the Iowa caucus.